I only thought he was a short-term exchange guest, but his smile made my heart stay forever. I thought he was just another fleeting accent in the hallways of Columbia. I didn't know his smile would become the place I'd run to when the world no longer made sense. I met Isaac on a Monday I was already determined to hate. That kind of Monday, the one where your coffee spills before the first sip, your thesis outline gets shredded by your professor, and your own damn brother texts you that he's getting married before you can even come out to him. The irony? I was the one who always had things figured out. Columbia law student. Queer but private. Always first in class, last in emotional availability. But when Isaac Monroe walked into our constitutional ethics seminar, he shattered that facade with the quiet elegance of someone who didn't even know he was breaking anything. He wore a light gray scarf despite the September heat. British, obviously. Not just British Oxbridge British, the kind with painfully charming vowels and a gait like he read poetry instead of walking. I only noticed him because he walked in 5 minutes late with a soft, sorry, that made Professor Kellerman lower his glasses like Isaac had just slapped the Constitution. Everyone turned. I rolled my eyes. Until he smiled. You know that moment in old movies when the camera zooms in, the violins swell, and time slows down? Yeah. That happened. In real life. To me. And I hated it. Isaac was a visiting student from Oxford, here for a short exchange program 8 weeks. He'd be auditing classes and shadowing in clinics. Just long enough to be charming. Just short enough to break something. He introduced himself in that lilting accent, and when Professor Kellerman asked him why he was studying American constitutional law, Isaac said, "Because your country pretends the law is sacred but treats it like theater. I find it fascinating." Everyone laughed. Even Kellerman smirked. I didn't. I was too busy pretending not to be impressed. In the following days, Isaac somehow started orbiting my world like he belonged there all along. He'd sit next to me in seminars. Ask sharp, insightful questions that made professors pause and rethink their syllabi. At lunch, he'd wander into our student lounge and read Baldwin out loud, completely unaware or uncaring that he was making half the room swoon. I kept telling myself, he's temporary. He's not even your type. But I was lying. I lied harder every time he laughed at my sarcastic jabs or brought me Earl Grey instead of black coffee, because your version tastes like punishment, he said, smiling. Still, I held the line. I don't mix real life with dreams. Not since I told my dad I liked boys and he told me I liked attention. I'd spent 10 years becoming someone untouchable because being soft had gotten me hurt before. But Isaac? He didn't build walls. He brought flowers to the debate team office for no reason. He played chess with our janitor during lunch breaks. He left handwritten notes in library books for strangers to find. He was everything I was trained to distrust. And everything I wanted to touch. It was during week 3 that things cracked. We were both assigned to a clinical outreach case about asylum seekers. I knew the laws. He knew the lives. After a tense meeting with a client who'd fled Uganda for being queer, Isaac sat on the church steps outside our office, eyes glistening. Not crying. Just heavy. He reminds me of my uncle, Isaac said quietly. Killed for who he loved. My family doesn't talk about him. But I remember his laugh. I sat beside him, silent. Then he whispered, "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" And two should have lied. I always lied. But something about the softness in his voice, the way he didn't look at me, made it impossible. Every day. He didn't say anything else. Just leaned his shoulder against mine. We sat like that until the sun dipped below the church's rusted cross. Until the pain felt shared. And the silence turned into something sacred. By week 5, Isaac had somehow made my apartment his second home. He'd show up with Thai takeout and stacks of old British case law. He corrected my accent when I read Wolf, and I mocked his obsession with Wawa coffee. We never kissed. We never said we were anything. But once, when we both reached for the same law review on my desk, our hands touched, and he didn't pull away. His fingers just stayed there, pressed against mine like they belonged. The night before his birthday, I bought him a small globe from a vintage shop. Not because it was romantic, but because he once said, "I want to know where I've been, even when I feel lost." When he unwrapped it, he just looked at it for a long moment. Then, "Thank you for remembering." And I said, without thinking, "You make it impossible to forget." He looked up. And in that instant, I knew. I'd already fallen. We kissed 2 nights later. It was raining because of course it was, and he was laughing, drenched, shirt clinging to his chest, yelling over the thunder, "You Americans never carry umbrellas." I pulled him under a bookstore awning. He pushed his wet hair back. I said, "You're ridiculous." He grinned. "And you're beautiful." Then he kissed me. Not a cautious kiss. Not a maybe we shouldn't. A kiss that said we already have. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of being seen. But love, like law, isn't always fair. And as week 8 approached, the countdown started ticking louder. The calendar didn't lie. Week 8 was here. And I hated every second of it. Isaac, for all his charm and quiet insight, had this way of making endings feel like they were just beginning. He still came by every day, still poured tea into my chipped Columbia mug like we had forever, not 48 hours. I was angry with him. Not for leaving. But for making me want something I couldn't keep. I tried to act normal. Joked when I didn't feel like laughing. Threw myself into casework. But Isaac knew. The night before his flight, we lay on my narrow bed, listening to Billie Holiday on vinyl because he said Spotify was too clean for heartbreak. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. "You sure?" I turned my head. "What do you want me to say, Isaac?" "That I'm fine. That this meant nothing. That I'll forget you by next week." He said nothing. So I kept going. "You don't get to walk in here and fix everything I spent years keeping broken." His eyes softened, but he didn't flinch. "You think I fixed you? I think you made me want to be real again." And I hated that, because reality meant pain. Love, even when it was good, always ended the same. He sat up, brushing a hand through his curls. "I don't want to leave either," he said. "But I have to." I stayed quiet. The weight of goodbyes always feels heavier at night. Then, barely a whisper, "Would you come with me?" The words hung in the air like smoke. "What?" "I'm not asking you to give up your life," he said. "Just think about visiting. We could figure something out. A year, maybe. Grad school in the UK. Or I come back." I blinked. "You're serious?" He reached for my hand. "I've never been more. But life is rarely that kind." The next morning, Isaac missed his flight. Not because of me. But because his father had a heart attack in London. He packed while on the phone. Frantic. Distant. Different. I helped him zip up his duffel, neither of us speaking. At the door, he turned. His eyes were red. "I don't want this to be goodbye." I nodded, but couldn't speak. He kissed me once soft, like a memory. Then he left. And my apartment, which had always felt temporary, now felt empty in a way I didn't know how to fix. Days passed. Then weeks. Isaac texted. At first, daily. Then less. His father needed care. He was considering deferring school. Taking time. Things I couldn't argue with. I told myself to move on. but grief, especially the kind that masquerades as hope, doesn't obey logic. I didn't hear from Isaac again until mid-December. A letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a photo of the globe I gave him, sitting on a windowsill dusted with snow. And a note. I still spin this every morning. If you ever want to find me, start here. No signature. Just his unmistakable pen. I booked a flight that night. London was cold and grey when I landed. I had no plan. Just an address he once scribbled in a notebook, the one he left on my bookshelf like a breadcrumb. I found the flat. A modest brick walk-up with ivy crawling over the windows. The kind of place where poets live and leave their dishes unwashed. I rang the bell, heart pounding. No answer. Just as I turned to leave, I heard the creak of a door above. There he was. Standing on the steps, hair messier than I remembered, wrapped in that same old scarf. He stared. I stared. And then he smiled. That same smile that ruined my life in the best possible way. I was starting to think you forgot where to start, he said. I stepped forward, heart in my throat. I got a little lost. You found me anyway. He came down the steps and wrapped his arms around me like no time had passed. And maybe it hadn't. We spent that winter rediscovering each other in back alley bookstores, smoky jazz bars, and the quiet of shared silence. I met his mother, who made us shepherd's pie and pretended not to notice we held hands under the table. We laughed. We fought. We planned. Not forever. Not yet. But for now. And that was enough. Spring came. With it, a scholarship offer. Oxford. 1 year. Full ride. I didn't even apply. Isaac did. Behind my back. Just in case, he said. I wanted to be mad. But I wasn't. Because for the first time in my life, someone believed in me enough to plan a future that included me. In June, I walked through the ancient stone arches of Magdalen College, wearing the stiff robes of a student I hadn't dreamed of being. Isaac stood at the gate, waiting. And as I approached, he whispered, "Welcome home." 1 year turned into 2. We built a life in pages and cups of tea, in sleepy mornings and late-night debates, in saying, "I love you," like it was the only language we needed. There were challenges. His father's recovery. My visa chaos. The constant ache of balancing ambition with intimacy. But we chose each other. Every single day. Then came the Supreme Court Fellowship. Back in the U.S. 1 year. I panicked. I can't do long distance, I said. Isaac nodded. Then don't. I blinked. What do you mean? He pulled out a letter. A second offer. A guest lectureship in New York. He grinned. Turns out they need people who understand constitutional law and sarcasm. On the flight home, he leaned his head on my shoulder. Still think I was just a short-term exchange student, he murmured. I kissed his temple. No. I think you were the start of everything real. Returning to New York felt like stepping into the old version of myself with a new heart I wasn't sure would survive the noise. Isaac adjusted faster than I did. He charmed his way through faculty meetings at NYU, brought British biscuits to his students, and somehow knew which subway lines not to trust by the second week. But me? I was drowning. The Supreme Court Fellowship was everything I thought I wanted. Prestige. Influence. A chance to rewrite the system from within. But I couldn't breathe. The chambers were cold. Literal marble and metaphorical silence. Everyone moved like ghosts in suits. No laughter. No joy. Just reverence for rules and unspoken tension. I missed Oxford. I missed walking hand in hand across bridges older than America. I missed being seen, not just for my resume, but for my soul. And I started to pull away. Not on purpose. Not cruelly. I just became quieter. More absent. Less us, more me. Isaac noticed. "Are we okay?" he asked one night, his voice soft, searching. I wanted to say yes. Instead, I stared at my laptop, eyes burning, and whispered, "I don't know." He sat beside me. Didn't touch me. Didn't rush. Just said, "You don't have to carry this alone, you know." And I cracked. "I'm scared," I confessed. "Of messing this up. Of choosing wrong. Of being the guy who gave up the Supreme Court for a boy." He didn't flinch. But his voice trembled. "Is that all I am? A boy?" "No," I whispered. "You're everything. And that's what terrifies me." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe the real fear isn't about choosing wrong. Maybe it's about finally choosing right." We didn't speak for the rest of the night. He stayed, curled on the couch while I worked late into the hollow hours of morning, pretending the law would love me back if I just gave it enough of myself. The next day, I got called into my supervisor's office. Justice Dalton. Stern. Sharp-eyed. The kind of woman who wore silence like armor. She studied me for a moment. Then said, "You're brilliant. But you're not here." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "You don't need to apologize. You need to figure out what you're actually chasing." I didn't know what to say. So she handed me a folder. This case came in from the ACLU. Asylum, again. 2 men. Nigeria. Queer couple. One's HIV positive, the other was outed by his own family. They barely made it out alive. I opened the file. My throat tightened. Justice Dalton leaned back. "I thought of you because you don't just know the law. You remember the people." I swallowed. "You're giving me the case. I'm giving you a chance to remember why you started this journey in the first place." That night, I found Isaac on the rooftop of our building, bundled in a coat 2 sizes too big, staring out over the Hudson. He didn't look at me when I stepped beside him. "I met a couple today," I said. "They're fighting to stay in this country. For the right to be who they are. To love who they love." Isaac exhaled, frosty breath curling in the cold. And I remembered something. He turned then. Waiting. I remembered that love is the reason I ever believed in the law. Not the other way around. His eyes softened. "Took you long enough." I smiled. "I'm a slow learner." He stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "But you learn." The case consumed me. We worked with translators. Doctors. Social workers. I visited detention centers. Read every clause, every precedent, every nightmare dressed up in legalese. Isaac helped where he could research, language, emotional ballast. And slowly, the weight I'd been carrying stopped crushing me and started shaping me. I wasn't afraid anymore. Because I knew why I was fighting. And who I was fighting for. The hearing was brutal. The government's attorney tried to paint the couple as opportunists. Said their relationship was convenient. Questioned their timeline. Their truth. But I stood. And I spoke. About fear. About fleeing in the night. About what it means to have your love criminalized. And I looked at the judge and said, "This isn't about loopholes. It's about life. And if this country still stands for freedom, then we cannot send these men back to die for who they are." Silence. Then the judge said, "Petition granted. Asylum approved." I didn't cry in court. But when I stepped outside and Isaac met me on the steps, eyes wide, arms open, I collapsed into him. Because that victory wasn't just for them. It was for us. That night, we walked by the river. I told him I was done chasing prestige for its own sake. I wanted to teach. To fight. To live. I want to build something real, I said. With you. He took my hand. We already are. We moved to D.C. a year later. I started teaching immigration law at Georgetown. Isaac began working with queer refugee networks, writing policy, holding stories, building bridges. We still fought. Still cried. Still had nights where the world felt like too much. But we faced it together. And every morning, he'd spin the globe beside our bed and whisper, "Where are we today?" And I'd say, "Right where we belong." Years passed. The world didn't get easier. But we did. Stronger. Softer. Wiser. Isaac's mother passed in spring. I held him through every shattering moment. My brother finally called me brave after his son came out. I didn't say, "I told you so." I just smiled. And on the 10th anniversary of the day Isaac first smiled at me in that Columbia classroom, he gave me a ring. Simple. Silver. Quiet like him. He didn't ask. He just said, "You've always been my answer." We married under a sky that refused to rain. Our vows were messy. Laughter through tears. Two men who had survived not just the world, but themselves. And when we kissed, I remembered every moment I thought I'd never get here. Every lie I told myself about not needing love. Not needing him. And I knew this was the most honest I had ever been. Marriage didn't make things easier. It just made them more true. It wasn't about the rings or the legal status or the way people said, "husband," with an awkward pause like it was still new to their tongue. It was the mornings. Waking up to Isaac humming while making tea. The shared toothbrush moments. The way he'd mutter legal terms in his sleep when working a tough case. It was the little things that anchored us. In the years that followed, we built not just a life, but a legacy. We co-founded a nonprofit for displaced LGBTQ+ youth, the Horizon Project. The name came from Isaac, of course. "The horizon is where everything begins," he said. "Even if it feels far." I taught law with the same fire I once tried to hide. Isaac traveled across states speaking, organizing, listening. Always listening. He had this way of making people feel heard. Like their stories mattered even when the world screamed otherwise. We bought a house in Maryland. Not because we wanted the white picket fence, God no, but because there was a porch just wide enough for 2 chairs and a view of the trees Isaac said reminded him of Oxford. There were hard seasons. The year I got pneumonia and Isaac stayed up 3 nights straight just to keep my fever in check. The time his father passed, and grief clung to him like shadow. I remember holding him in the kitchen as he sobbed against the fridge, whispering, "I wasn't enough for him," over and over. "You were more than enough," I told him. He just didn't know how to see it. And slowly, Isaac believed me. We never had children. Not because we didn't want them. But because our life became filled with dozens, then hundreds, of young people who called, wrote, came by. Kids with nowhere to go who found refuge in the shelter we helped build. Students who quoted Isaac in their dissertations. Survivors who held our hands and said, "You made me believe again." That was enough. Sometimes more than enough. On our 15th anniversary, Isaac took me back to the steps of the church where we first sat shoulder to shoulder, broken open by someone else's pain. The building was older, cracked with time. But the bench remained. We sat there in silence. Then he handed me a letter. I opened it. Inside, a copy of the first letter he ever sent, one with the photo of the globe. He had rewritten it. I still spin this every morning. But now I know. I don't have to find you. You were always home. I looked up. And there he was. Teary. Smiling. Steady as the day I fell in love with him. I didn't know who I was until I loved you, he said. I didn't speak. I just kissed him. We kept growing older. Together. Our hair grayed. Our pace slowed. The world kept moving forward, sometimes painfully fast, sometimes frustratingly backward. But we had each other. And that meant everything. Then came the diagnosis. Isaac. Stage 4 lymphoma. I didn't breathe for an entire minute when the doctor said it. Treatment is possible, she said. But the prognosis. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I sat in that sterile room holding Isaac's hand, staring at the wall like it owed me answers. He squeezed gently. Don't look so scared. I turned. Don't tell me not to be scared. I'm terrified. His voice was calm. Then be terrified. But don't be alone in it. Chemo started. It was brutal. Isaac lost weight. His curls fell out. His voice wavered. But his spirit? Never once. He still spun the globe every morning. Still smiled when I walked into the room. Still whispered, "We've had a beautiful life, haven't we?" I wanted to scream. No. Not yet. Not enough. Not fair. But instead, I just held him tighter every night. One morning, near the end, I found him on the porch wrapped in 2 blankets, sipping tea with shaking hands. He patted the chair beside him. Come sit. I did. He looked out at the trees. The ones he said reminded him of Oxford. I had a dream last night, he said. You were speaking in front of Congress. Something about immigration reform. You looked so sure of yourself. I chuckled. That definitely was a dream. He smiled. It was beautiful. You were brilliant. And afterward, you came home and danced with me in the kitchen. You were terrible at it, but I loved every second. Silence. Then he turned to me. When I go, promise me you'll keep dancing. I swallowed. Isaac. I'm serious. Keep living. Keep fighting. Keep building. I don't want to be your ending. You never were, I whispered. You were my beginning. Isaac passed away on a rainy Thursday morning. I held his hand until it stopped holding mine. He was calm. Peaceful. And the last words he said to me were, "Thank you for choosing me." Grief is not a hole you fall into. It's a shape you grow around. I kept the house. The porch. The globe. I speak now everywhere. Colleges. Courts. Community centers. I tell our story not because it's perfect. But because it's real. Because someone out there needs to know that love doesn't always last forever in time, but it lasts forever in impact. One day, a young man approached me after a lecture. He was nervous. Tall. Thin. British accent. I just wanted to say your story gave me the courage to come out to my father. I smiled. How did it go? He grinned. Terribly. But I feel free. I laughed. Then it went exactly right. He pulled a book from his backpack. A worn copy of Giovanni's Room. Would you sign this? It was Isaac's favorite, right? My throat closed. But I nodded. Took the pen. And wrote. To freedom, and the ones who make it worth the fight. Some nights, I still dream of him. He's younger. Whole. walking toward me across that Columbia classroom, scarf swinging, smile bright. I always wake up smiling. Not because I miss him, but because, in some way, he never left. I thought he was just a short-term exchange student. But he was the love of my life. And no matter how far the horizon stretches, my heart will always stay where his smile first found it. The end. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.